everyone, my name is Jess and welcome to our ATAR Notes lecture for today. Today we're covering QCE Business Units 3 and 4. But before we get into a little bit more about me and our content for today, I want to introduce ATAR Notes to you. So some of you may not have heard of us before if this is your first lecture series that you're joining. So ATAR Notes started back in 2007, and since then we've been offering lots of free resources to help students through their years at high school. So the lecture series is just one of our offerings, and in a minute you'll be able to see all of the different other things that are out there that you can access to help you not only with business but also with all of your other subjects as well. So let's have a look. I recommend that you go to our website, atarnotes.com, and you can sign up there and get access to all of our resources. So in addition to lectures, we also have online Q&As, videos, articles, newsletters, and study notes. So lots of downloadable resources, lots of video resources, all the different formats that can help you with any subject that you feel like you need a little bit of guidance for. And we also have a new offering called ATAR Notes Plus, and I encourage you to have a look at that as well. You can see here on the screen that we've got the example of some of the study notes that you can get access to. One of them is actually for business, and that's actually one that I wrote myself for QCE Business. So if you access ATAR Notes Plus, then you can get all of these different resources as well as many other things as well. So as I said, my name is Jess, and a little bit about me. So I graduated in 2020. It's been a few years now, and I'm currently studying communication and journalism at the University of Queensland. I have just finished my third year of that, but since it's a dual degree, that means it's 4 years, so one to go. In year 12, I got a business score of 95, and I love reading and writing, so the humanities kind of subjects were for me at school, so business, accounting, legal studies, and English as well was my favorite. Okay, let's get stuck into what we'll be covering in today's lecture. So first of all, something that's really important throughout business in year 11 and 12 is your environmental factors. So we'll have a look at those to start with. Then we'll go through a range of content that you'll need to know. This lecture and all of the lectures that I do follow directly from the syllabus. And we'll also be looking at the analytical tools and the evaluation criteria that you'll need for exams and assignments this year. And also having a look at your IA2 and finishing off with some tips and advice for you moving forward. So this lecture is based on Unit 3, Topic 2, which should be what is potentially coming up for you at school. Different schools have different arrangements with the way that they structure the units, but for most of you, this will be the next thing that you'll be covering next year. So to start with, environmental factors. Now in this unit, you'll need to be able to describe business facts and characteristics relating to businesses in the maturity stage of the business life cycle. In year 11, you would have gone through the other phases with the startup phase and the growth phase. You may have also looked at the seed phase to start with as well. And we've now extended beyond that and we're at maturity, the peak of where a business is up to. So this requirement in terms of environmental factors includes internal and operating environmental factors. And that's specifically related to those factors that are impacting marketing and operations, and also the macro environmental factors. So you can see here we've got a bit of a diagram to remind you of what each of these are. So in our internal, which is the inside, you've got owners and managers, employees, organizational structure, and organizational culture. So I like to think of environmental factors as making up a bit of a house of some sort. So you could think of it even as just a business itself. You've got what is inside the business. Logically, you're going to have employees, you're going to have the structure of the business itself and those who own and manage it. The operating is going to be the way that that building, that foundation functions. So you can think of it as the walls and the structure of it. So customers, competitors, suppliers, it's that environment that the business sits in. And you've also got the macro as well, which is even broader. It's all of those outside things. So you can remember this using the acronym STEEPLE, which is one of your analytical tools as well, the STEEPLE analysis: sociocultural, technological, economic, environmental, political, legal, and ethical. Okay, now let's have a look at some examples to give us a little bit more insight into these different categories. So an example for internal, and this relates to both organizational structure. So in terms of internal, it relates to organizational structure, and in terms of operating, it relates to customers. So Medibank. And so in 2022, they had a 2-month review and they decided to change their organizational structure. So this is related to that idea of the internal factor there. So they had a flatter organizational structure. That's the decision that they made in terms of what change to make. And they also had some new leadership positions and fewer positions as well in other areas. They got rid of 118 other positions. So that's simplifying that structure to increase efficiencies and things like that. And they also changed the way that they operated as well. So instead of focusing on market share, they wanted to focus more on customers. They wanted to focus on retaining the members that they already had and reducing their expenses as well. So they identified that customers were concerned about increasing prices for health insurance, and they wanted to address that by making these changes. So this is how you can look at the environment that a business is operating in and then describe the situation in terms of these internal operating and macro factors. Another example, and this one is also operating, but in this case it's about suppliers. So both KFC and Red Rooster here. Now, we probably are all familiar with the lettuce shortage that we had not too long ago now, and that happened in both New South Wales and Queensland because of the floods, and it impacted different food chains in terms of the way that they were able to present their usual menu because the lettuce was no longer available. So both KFC and Red Rooster had to change their operations in terms of making menu changes. So lots of them went for cabbage instead as an alternative. And they also had to do some marketing things as well. So developing communications to explain the situation and ensure that everyone was aware of those operational changes. So you can see here we've got a heads up notice that KFC made to let people know about those changes. So remembering that the internal and operating factors for this unit are all about the operations and marketing. So this is a really clear example of how these things are all interrelated. And lastly, we've got Optus as a macro factor, and political and legal are both relevant here. So in September 2022, just more than a year now, a data breach occurred which involved a cyber criminal getting a hold of around 10 million Optus customers' personal details. And this resulted in the Australian government passing some new legislation. This is the laws coming in here. And that significantly increased penalties for repeated or serious privacy breaches. And the whole idea of this was they're trying to incentivize big companies like Optus to ensure that the data that they collect is properly protected, because we can see how the vulnerabilities that may exist can result in this kind of data breach. So this relates to legal for obvious reasons because of passing legislation, and it's also relating to political as well because it was that government decision to introduce that legislation as well. So throughout today's lecture, I've got some questions to jog your memory, to jog your thinking, and make sure that you are taking in everything that we're covering and then reflecting on it. So I encourage you to pause the video if you want to have a go at these questions, or you can simply download the slides, and later on when you want to be reviewing things for your study or your assessment, then you can potentially use these slides as a bit of a guide to help you with that. So this first one, choose a mature business and a relevant internal operating or macro environmental factor, and write a description of the business environment and the situation. So if you choose an internal or operating factor, then try and focus on operations and marketing because that is the focus of this unit for those different factors. And write about 100 words about the business and think about those businesses that we just covered as well. It's as simple as that, choosing something that's relevant and writing that kind of description to explain the situation. Okay, now we're on to the rest of the content that we're covering today. So first of all is integrated marketing communications strategies. So IMC is the acronym here. Now this is, as the name suggests, a unified promotional method, and it's going to involve a range of different communication platforms. They're all joining together and working together to support each other. That's this whole idea of integrated, is that it's all together and in support of one another. It's a long-term and customer-centric marketing approach, and it's all about consistency and optimizing the influence that the communication has in terms of getting the results that the business is looking for. So we've got a whole bunch of examples here. So you can use any number of these as part of an integrated marketing communication strategy. Mobile marketing, emerging avenues like AI is a huge one. Print media and direct mail is more traditional. You've got public relations, sales promotion, social media, web ads, and search engines, and lots more as well. Now, 4 IMC strategies that we're going to look at include recognition, relevance, reward, and relationship. So the 4 R's. Before we get into looking at each of those in turn, though, let's have a look at an example of a business that's used a IMC strategy effectively. So Coca-Cola in this case. they have the Share a Coke campaign, and this involved using multiple digital and traditional channels that all supported one another as part of the campaign. So TV commercials, and then also social media, cinema, outdoor, and experiential activation as well. So not only online, not only on TV, but also physical as well. So cinema, outdoor, and actual activations as well to get people involved. And they allowed people to create personalized cans at Coca-Cola kiosks. And so that is another idea of having that physical presence as well. And they allowed them to gift a personalized virtual Coca-Cola can through social media. So this is creating this idea of accessibility. You've got an offering for people who can make it to these physical places where they can create a personalized can. You're also appealing to those who aren't able to attend places like that, but who are adept with things like social media. They're allowing for personalization, so it's appealing to people in that way. Using people's names is something that is going to make people feel a bit closer to the brand and the campaign. So they also had consistent brand elements. So even though you've got all of these different things that are happening as part of the campaign, all of these strategies and communication platforms that are being used, the whole idea is it still needs to be integrated. It still needs to support each other, and that calls for that level of consistency. So you can tell that, of course, it's Coke, so it's going to have the red theme throughout. It's going to have the same typography, the same logos. All of those different elements remain consistent. And also another consistent element is that call to action. So share a Coke in this case was the main message, and it was the focal point of all of the communication, regardless of the media channel that was used. So you've got that consistent branding, so you've got the recognition factor, and then you've got the consistent call to action. So people can engage with the campaign in multiple ways, and then they have that repetition. In order for people to change their behavior or be persuaded of something, a really key thing is always repetition. So that is why having that consistent messaging across channels is really important for IMC and just for marketing and public relations in general as well. So let's have a look at each of the 4 strategies for IMC. First of all is recognition. Now, this I touched on there with recognizing the brand of Coca-Cola. So consumers want to be familiar with the business's values and then also be able to actually distinguish the business's products from competitors. That is where having that branding and that consistency comes through with logos and colors and things like that. And the idea of a USP or a unique selling proposition is strongly connected to that idea of recognition, because people can distinguish between different businesses based on what is unique about them. So having that unique element is important. And loyalty schemes can be implemented for regular customers to recognize their allegiance to the business as well. In terms of relevance, it's important that whatever you're saying is actually relevant to who you're saying it to. If you provide information to consumers that is not relevant to them, then they're going to be motivated to actually delete those emails or ignore them altogether, send them to spam, not engage with any of the different platforms that you may be using. So I'm sure most of us are familiar with that idea of receiving all sorts of emails that we don't want and listing it as spam or deleting it without reading it, those sorts of things. So this is tying in with this idea of relevance. And companies need to identify their target market's needs and wants and strive to fulfill those needs and wants in order to maintain that relevance. So consumers need to understand why they need to know the message, why they should read it or engage with it. And that is going to give the business a competitive edge because it's going to reduce the risk that customers are going to go and seek alternatives from competitors. If you can maintain consumer engagement with your brand, then they're more likely to buy from you in the future. In terms of reward, this one is pretty self-explanatory. So consumers need to get some kind of benefit from engaging with the business's messages. And this can be tangible or intangible. So rewards can be that tangible idea in terms of things like gift cards and vouchers, or you could have entertainment or education gained from the communication as well. That's more of an intangible thing, because it's that sort of that benefit that they're getting that isn't just a monetary thing, it's a skill thing or an enjoyment thing. And it's important that every piece of communication is going to present some kind of reward because otherwise you're going to lose engagement with the communication that you're using. So, for example, on social media, we don't just see constant promotion of things without some kind of incentive for us to be looking at it or engaging with it. So, different companies are going to hold free giveaways or they're going to have discounts if you subscribe to something or if you like something or comment or things like that. So you're asking for engagement with your messages, and in return, you're presenting some kind of reward as well. And relationship is the last one. And this is all about having that rapport between a business and its consumers. And this is about maintaining the communication in order to have that relationship. If you don't communicate regularly, then the consumer isn't going to feel very close to you. They're not going to feel like they have much of a reason to stay loyal to you. So having that balance between regularity and, I guess, spam kind of messages. You don't want things to be too regular in terms of your messaging because oftentimes that will result in people unsubscribing or ignoring because you're going overboard with the messaging. But irregular communication is also the flip side of that, where you're not making enough of an effort to engage with those consumers. Next up is relationship marketing, and this relates pretty closely to what I was just talking about because relationship is part of that IMC structure as well. In terms of relationship marketing, though, it's a form of marketing that's prioritizing retaining existing customers instead of just continually attracting new customers. So you want to create those lasting relationships to get customers to stick around. And that is going to mean that you don't need to be constantly pumping resources into trying to attract new customers, which some would say is a little bit more tricky than just retaining who you've already managed to get, especially when you got hostile competitive industries. that can be really tricky. So the whole idea is fostering consumer loyalty, repeat purchases, and then customer referrals as well. If you do manage to retain existing customers, then that can actually help you with attracting new ones as well, because they will have that idea of word of mouth. They'll recommend you to other people. They'll do reviews that will shed you in that positive light. So that is where you can have this flow on effect of just focusing on current customers. And this is a long-term strategy, and it's going to achieve efficiency and cost effectiveness as opposed to pumping, like I said, resources constantly into finding new people, because there's only so many customers out there. If you're constantly losing people, then it's going to be hard to then gain people, because those people who are looking for different options are going to think, why is it that the company can't attract and retain customers? If customers are leaving, then there must be a reason for that. So there's a bunch of strategies here as well. You can seek and act on customer feedback as part of this relationship marketing format. You can also have loyalty programs to get people to stick around, and that can involve discounts. It can involve anything that's going to get people to keep coming back in order to have those rewards and benefits that they'll get. Integrating consumers into social media posts is a big one with user-generated content, and maintaining that idea of communication, like I said earlier, that idea of balance between too much and not enough. Quality products and customer-focused service. So that is the crux of a business. You just want to be offering something that's of value, and that's going to incentivize people to stick around as well. So let's have a look at some examples of good relationship marketing. First up is Starbucks. So Starbucks has a loyalty program, which is one of those examples we just saw, and it provides members with access to exclusive offers, invitations to different events, and then access also to free drinks. So it communicates with customers through emails regularly, and customers are encouraged to submit ideas, requests, and feedback because they have a dedicated website for that. So you can see a few of those strategies we just looked at are being used here. We've got loyalty programs, we've got rewards, we've got feedback and acting on feedback, and then also we've got this idea of user-generated content and integrating customers into social media. So they seek out different stories from customers, and they feature those stories on their social media feed, and then also repost user-generated content as well. That's giving the person who generated the content to begin with some exposure, and it's also helping the business because it's showing that it does have that relationship with customers. It's establishing this kind of reputation that is then going to attract other people to the business as well. GoPro has a similar idea focused on the idea of rewards and user-generated content. So it's got a program called GoPro Awards, and it's giving the opportunity for GoPro users to use their products, get photos and videos, and then if they win the award, then they receive money and discounts and gear, and then also that global exposure on GoPro's social media in return. So various things that can all be used together to incentivize this relationship maintenance for customers with a business. So, next question. Describe integrated marketing communications and list the 4 integrated marketing communications strategies. So, whenever you're doing these sorts of things, also try and think of examples as well. If you can remember different examples that either we cover in the lecture or that you can think of yourself, then that is going to help you remember things and understand things better as well. Because sometimes it's those real world examples that we identify with more than just all of these words and all of this content that can get a little bit overwhelming. And also, having examples is really key when it gets to doing exams. Unit 3, Topic 2 is an assignment rather than an exam. But for your external exam at the end of the year, you'll also want to have some examples up your sleeve of different concepts. And so it's good to get into that habit of remembering those examples throughout the year. Next up is Total Quality Management, or TQM. Now, this is a management approach that's all about continual improvement and achieving customer satisfaction. So you'll notice that a lot of these things that we're discussing are about customers, very customer centric. When it gets to the maturity stage, you are pretty dominant in your industry and you are often going to be in that competitive kind of environment though, because you have lots of different competitors, you're no longer growing so much, and therefore making sure that you try and keep customers and maintain your market share is really important. So TQM is all about empowering employees within a business to strive for high quality. So it's not just about people involved in operations, but also just everyone in the business. It's a very wholesome kind of approach. Now, an example, we've got Vitex Pharmaceuticals, and they have a quality management system in place that governs every aspect of the business's operations. So, all the way from receiving the materials that it uses as part of its products to handling the products, storing, manufacturing, and then packaging, and then finally distribution as well. So, part of this is often going to be keeping up with technology, the latest advancements and trends. So, Vitex does that by tracking that technology and those advancements, and it's looking in particular at equipment facilities so they can ensure that they're operating with the most accurate production methods as possible. And so they also need to factor in the government as well. That's another thing with total quality management. It is very much so about customers, appealing to customers by offering that value that they're going to keep coming back for. But also, we've got lots of companies out there that have to really comply with strict government regulations, industry regulations, especially when it's something like pharmaceuticals, which is a pretty serious kind of thing. It's a medical thing. And as part of total quality management, we also have 2 different sub ideas as well. We've got quality control, or QC, and quality assurance, or QA. So we've got to make sure we understand the difference between these because they do sound very similar and it can be a little bit tricky to remember the difference. Now, quality control is based on more of a reactive kind of idea. So it's about conducting tests and inspections of products to make sure that they have met those required quality standards without any sort of defects or issues present. So in this case, the product has already been made and then you're checking the product retrospectively. So the objective here is to identify the issues and then guarantee that the products are compliant with those prearranged quality criteria. And it's reactive, so it can be expensive because if you continually have issues with the products that you've already made, then you're going to continually have to invest in fixing those issues. You've already made a product and then you have to go back and put more time and money and effort into addressing issues and investigating issues as well, because it may not be a straightforward problem. Now, on the other hand, quality assurance is about proactively preventing any issues or defects from occurring in the first place. So, this is about having a series of processes to assure that you've got a specified degree of quality at each stage. So, like we saw before with Vitex, they have those quality management systems that are allowing them to ensure that every part of its process is meeting quality standards. Because if you only focus on operations, then you'll be looking at a product that's already been made and you may have missed earlier signs that there were issues. So perhaps there's issues with supply, with storage or handling, or any of those aspects before it even goes into that manufacturing kind of stage. So having that process, that incremental idea where you're checking quality as you go, can help you to find quality issues as soon as they arise and address them as soon as they arise without needing to retrospectively go back and fix issues afterwards. Now, another total quality management example you may be familiar with is Toyota. So Toyota is really big on this idea of TQM because it's following the principles of customer first, quality first, continuous improvement, and total participation as well. That idea that it's not just about people working in operations, but it's about everyone participating and achieving quality standards. So they've got this idea of lean production as well. And all of these principles are part of this TQM structure that it has. And they have actually been recognized with some awards in the past to recognize their TQM practices. Some of these are quite a long time ago, but they are pretty big awards to get. Question 3. Describe relationship marketing and include an example of a business that does relationship marketing well and explain how it does this well. So we looked before at GoPro and Starbucks for relationship marketing. So try and think of other businesses. Think about businesses that maybe you engage with yourself that you really like and how they may effectively do relationship marketing to keep you engaged and loyal to them as opposed to other competitors. Project management. And a project is a unique operation, and so it's intended to achieve a particular series of objectives. A project is not just a day-to-day activity, it's more specific than that. It's more unique than just what happens every day in the workplace. And then as a result, project management is just managing that kind of project. It's overseeing the operations to ensure that it's achieved and completed successfully in all of the given constraints. So it meets the budget and time constraints and things like that. So traditional project management consists of 5 different stages. You've got initiating, so starting off the project. You've got planning, which is thinking ahead, establishing that idea of what are the goals, what are the resources that we have to meet those goals, what are the deadlines and the budgets and things like that. Executing the project itself, performing and controlling, and then closing. So, some examples of projects: you could be launching a new service, launching a unified data system, developing a new product, or having a marketing campaign. So these are the sorts of things that aren't just going to happen every day. They're far bigger than that. That's what makes them a project, and that's why project management is a whole field in itself. Now, there are a few different project management methods. We're looking at the waterfall method and the agile method. So, the waterfall method is a bit more traditional, and it's about phases that occur consecutively from beginning to end. It's a linear kind of model where you're going from one thing to the next. Whereas the agile method is a little bit more modern, and it's often used in fast moving business settings, innovative business settings, because of its flexibility. So it's more iterative. You've got frequent releases of things with incremental enhancements in every iteration. So instead of having one major release at the end of a linear kind of process, like you would have in the waterfall method, you're releasing things incrementally, you're improving things as you go, instead of having that final thing at the end. So having those frequent releases allows for identifying different problems with initial releases. It allows for collaboration because different people can get involved and give feedback and all contribute to improving what was made. Now, Vistaprint is an example of a business that has used the agile method. So originally, Vistaprint used the waterfall method for project management, but it found that teams were taking more than 60 days to transition from just the idea phase to product delivery. So that idea of linear, you're going from beginning to end, and it was taking a really long time. So they switched to the agile method, and they introduced a bunch of different strategies within that. So collaborative boards, idea pipelines, daily stand-ups to share different ideas, that idea of collaboration. And as a result, it was able to optimize its business processes, and that reduced its lead time from 40 hours to 15 hours. So you can see how the agile method can allow for collaboration, allow for saving time, and then also as a result, saving money too. So outsourcing is something that many of us are probably familiar with already. It's that idea of tactically choosing to employ external professionals to manage certain secondary business activities that are currently overseen internally. So, mature businesses that want to be competitive within their hostile industries can use outsourcing to enhance operational efficiency, reduce expenses, and then gain access to skills and expertise that they may not have in the business. So it does have those benefits, but disadvantages are also there as well. So there are some ethical concerns about outsourcing, particularly with low wage countries. So in Australia, it does cost more to pay people to do things, which is why you often see Australian made things come at more of a premium price. Whereas when we source clothing, for example, from places like China or Bangladesh, then they are often cheaper. And that is because of some ethical issues with wages and things like that, and working conditions as well with companies that outsource to there. You've also got loss of employee positions within the business. So as soon as you take an aspect of the business elsewhere, then you are going to lose positions as well. Now, remember that outsourcing and offshoring are two different concepts. So, outsourcing has a bit of an overlap with offshoring because offshoring is about going overseas for things. Outsourcing can mean that as well. You can outsource overseas, but you can also outsource just domestically as well. Um, it's more of a broader kind of concept. And also possible quality problems as well. If you're taking something outside of the business, then you're relying on other companies or professionals to deliver your products and or your services or whatever it is that they are taking over. So you're taking away control, or they are taking control from you, and you've got less of an ability to ensure that everything is being done to your standards. An example of a business that's used outsourcing is Slack, which is a workplace communication messaging kind of platform. So it was originally designed by 4 developers, and they decided to outsource their beta testing from a design firm to help them understand how to improve the product and suit consumers' needs. So, this is an example of how the company can get access to skills and expertise that the team doesn't already have. And then you've got lots of different examples, as I mentioned previously, with different clothing companies that are going to outsource to other kind of places in order to get things like that at cheaper prices. Question 4. Explain the difference between quality control and quality assurance. So the key here is you've got one is proactive and one is reactive. So try to think of something that's going to help you remember that difference. I guess quality assurance, which is the proactive one, is about assuring that it's of high quality throughout the whole process, whereas quality control is just looking at something after it's already been produced to make sure it does meet those standards. Economies of scale relevant to operations and marketing. So you may not have heard of this term before, economies of scale, but based on the name, you may be able to have a slight idea of what it could be getting at. So it's about the cost advantages that a business can get by expanding the scale of its business operations and thus reducing per unit input expenses. So think about when you buy something in bulk, often that means you can then get it at a cheaper rate. So if you're looking at something even just in a supermarket in terms of food, if you buy a big bottle of milk, then it's going to be cheaper than buying a small 1 liter bottle of milk. So marketing economies of scale occur when large corporations can decrease the unit outlay on advertising and therefore access more effective marketing mediums. And so an example for a business related to operations, though, which ties in with that idea of buying things in bulk and that milk example I gave. Costco themselves, they purchase things in bulk. And that means that they're charged less for those goods. And then as a result, Costco can reduce the prices that it charges consumers and therefore increase sales volume. So you've got this flow on effect. The decision to buy in bulk, then being charged less, then charging consumers less, and then increasing sales. So that's that idea of having those economic benefits of scaling up operations or marketing activities. The role of branding in maintaining market share. We've got the famous McDonald's arches here, the golden arches. So branding offers lots of different advantages to businesses. You can have brand loyalty from consumers. You've got business recognition, so people recognize things like the Coca-Cola thing that I was talking about earlier. We recognize the logo, the coloring, the typography. Drive recurring sales. So when you've got that loyalty, the recognition, that kind of relationship with customers already, it means that they're going to keep coming back for more. Facilitating the introduction of different products, because if people are already familiar with your offering, they're already trusting you to offer quality things or things that they like, then they're going to be more open to delving into things that are less familiar because you've got that consistency with the brand that's familiar. Even if the products aren't familiar, you've got that backing behind you because of the brand. And you can also have premium pricing as well, because when you have that trust, then consumers probably think that what you offer is valuable or good quality or that kind of thing. And that means that they're willing to pay more for that because they've got that trust in it. So all of this basically works together to help businesses maintain their market share. Because if you've got customers sticking around, then that means you've got this idea of relationship marketing, like we were talking about earlier, retaining people rather than just relying on constantly finding new customers. So if we look at McDonald's as an example, the golden arches are really well recognized across the world. And a survey was actually conducted on how well recognized the arches are. 88% of respondents recognized the McDonald's logo, and that compared to only 54 identifying the Christian cross. So you've got branding is really powerful, and that power can result in market share. Question 5 is describe project management. And for this one, try and also think of an example of a business as well. Think of a project that they could be doing. So, for example, introducing a new product or service, and then explain what project management involves. The role of contingency planning and also Fielder's contingency model. Now, contingency planning is all about having a plan B. So, developing that action strategy to assist them in different circumstances or when different events occur. So, they're thinking about what could go wrong and then planning for what they would do in those circumstances. It's a risk management tactic. So when you've got those risks of what could happen, you're managing them by thinking ahead and trying to implement different plans of action for what you would do. And so, therefore, it's that really important aspect of strategic planning. You're looking ahead rather than just focusing on the present. So, a model that we can use in contingency planning is prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. So, of course, to begin with, you do want to prevent things from going wrong. So, that's the first step. But then having that preparation in place in case something does go wrong, then the response if it does go wrong, and the recovery that comes afterwards. And all of this is going to minimize the harm suffered by a business if any kind of event goes wrong. So think about all of the different things that could go wrong in terms of an airline, for example. They would have to have lots of different plans in place, but what happens in different weather conditions, in different situations with passengers being sick, having a medical emergency, having storms, having engine failure, or any of those things that could go wrong with an aircraft. And they would have to prepare for all of those situations. So if it does happen, they can keep all the passengers safe and implement those strategies without panic. Now, Fielder's contingency model says that no particular leadership style is considered the best because it depends on the situation. It's circumstantial. So different leadership styles are needed in different situations. And it uses this idea of the least preferred co-worker scale. And that is used to determine whether a leader's style is relationship orientated or task orientated. And we can talk about this as LPC. This LPC scale involves leaders rating the co-worker they enjoy working with the least from 1 to 8 using a series of criteria. And so this can include loyalty, friendliness, trustworthiness, all of these different things that they can rate that person on. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. So you can see how we've got this idea of the scale. So on one end, you're going to have the negative aspects, unpleasant, disloyal, unfriendly. And then the other end is the positive version of that word. So it's got to be something that has an opposite. So unpleasant or pleasant. It can't be two completely different things. And then you've got the score as well from 1 to 8, with 1 being the least favorable. Now, relationship-orientated leaders value interpersonal relationships, and therefore they rate their co-workers higher. So they're rating their least preferred co-worker, so the co-worker they don't enjoy working with, but they want to maintain relationships because that's their value, and so they're more likely to rate that co-worker higher. Whereas a task-orientated leader is more focused on strong performance and achieving goals rather than maintaining a relationship with someone who they don't enjoy working with. So they're more likely to score that person less favorably. So that's a pretty logical thing to remember. High LPC is relationship orientated and low LPC is task orientated. So there's 3 situational variables in the contingency model. So you've got leader-member relations, the level of trust employees have in their leader. You've got task structure, so how clear our tasks requirements are. And so ambiguousness is not favorable here. You want the requirements to be really clear so everyone knows their role and what they're doing. And then position power. So this is the level of authority and power the leader has over employees. So leadership styles and situational variables can be looked at in conjunction with one another to determine who the best leader is for a particular situation. So we can see here if we've got good leader-member relations, high task structure, strong position power, then the favorableness is most favorable, then the appropriate leader is task orientated. So you've got those different categories depending on the answer for each of the situational variables as you go down the list. The role of emerging technologies and contemporary marketing strategies. This is really huge these days with AI now. So, emerging technologies impact these strategies because things like data analytics, customer relationship management, and mobile communications are heavily technology based. So lots of the marketing things use technology as part of the way that they work. So emerging technologies have introduced new marketing techniques. So augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality are examples of those. And also it's about data as well, emerging technologies and their link with data. So marketers can learn more about specific target markets, and this allows the business to identify the most effective marketing channels and then target specific demographics with customized ads and content. So the power of data is not to be underestimated because that's really important when it comes to marketing. You don't want to be sending out things and messages to the wrong people. If we think back to that integrated marketing communications idea we looked at the beginning, relevance was one of the ideas. And so you need to have that relevance, and data can help you achieve that. So an example of this, we've got some cosmetics companies. So Maybelline, L'Oreal, and Sephora. They have they've used technologies to create apps that allow customers to trial makeup and hair products in a virtual setting. So this uses AR in this case. And you can see with that photo there that the person in the photo is being shown without the makeup product and then with it as well. So customers could do this so they can trial what it would look like on them. And it's demonstrating the importance of emerging technologies in improving the customer experience and appealing to those who are adept with different technologies. So you're providing this service. People want to know if the product is suitable for them. Traditionally, we see it on a model of some sort, and we think it looks good on them because they've arranged it to look good on the particular person, but we're not sure if it suits us. And this AR, in this case, is being used to address that kind of gap that they've identified. Another example, which is quite subtle but clever, is Nike Land. So this is a virtual playground that players can explore. They can create avatars and build friendships within this metaverse. And it's a subtle strategy because the Nike Land players wear Nike products, so shoes, clothes, and accessories, and this is generating that exposure for the Nike brand. So even if you're not interested in sports or Nike itself. Maybe you're a gamer who's interested in this kind of thing. Maybe you're seeking friendships in that virtual kind of setting. So you can then engage with this product and then as a result get exposure to a business you may not otherwise have gotten exposure to, and you may be more inclined to buy those products in future. Even if you don't want them for sport, you could still want to buy them in general for the brand aspect of it. Question 6 is describe outsourcing and its benefits and challenges. So things like reduced expenses and access to greater skills, but then disadvantages like losing skills, losing employees, and potentially having some ethical issues, and as a result, some reputation issues if you're not outsourcing responsibly. The role of research and development in operational and marketing strategies. So, as we all know, research is really important in everything that we do. And so, it's no different when it comes to business with their operations and their marketing, because it's about businesses discovering new things, so new technologies, exploring new products and services, and advancing what they already offer, what they already have. So they need to maintain their competitiveness, and this is a way of doing that by keeping up with others that are in those hostile industries. So, in terms of operations, you can have manufacturing efficiencies. Maybe you do R&D and that helps you learn about different technologies that you can use for automation and things like that. That's going to then result in manufacturing efficiencies. So you can see that link between R&D and operations. And then the same deal as well with marketing strategies. You can have a better reputation and get positive publicity as a result of R&D. Maybe you're looking into different ways that you can use marketing to enhance the way the business is perceived by customers. So maybe you're looking at how to make your business more sustainable, and you then include that as part of your marketing. You show that you're doing R&D in that area, and that's going to get you some positive publicity, because people are agreeing with your brand values and wanting to support you as well. So an example here is Tesla, the car brand. So a report showed that Tesla actually spends more on research and development per car than any other automaker, which is unsurprising in that it is sort of seen as an innovative kind of idea with its electric kind of offering. And it also then spends the least in advertising costs per car sold. So it's relying on its strong brand for marketing purposes. People understand what they're getting. If they get a Tesla, they're getting something that's seen as premium, that's seen as sustainable and innovative. And so the R&D that they do enhances reputation, and it contributes to its leading position in the electric vehicle industry. And all of that has that flow on effect by allowing it to minimize marketing costs. So, question 7, define economies of scale and provide an example of a business that uses this strategy. Earlier, we looked at Costco, but there's lots of other businesses that do that model of bulk buying things to then sell on at cheaper prices. And then also think of not only the operations side, but also the marketing side. If you go really big with your marketing strategy, then it can cost less per unit, then that is going to result in that economies of scale. The bigger the scale, the more cost efficient it is. Challenges of outsourcing marketing and operational strategies, activities. So we looked at some of these earlier in terms of disadvantages, but there are some other just general challenges as well. So in terms of management, they need to actually think about what partner they're going to use for outsourcing. So I mentioned earlier about losing some sense of control by outsourcing to an external organization. So you really need to have trust in that business or that provider. And that is about making sure that they run their operations ethically, that they have high quality standards, and all of those different things that you are obligated to meet. You need to actually make sure that those outsourcing partners are meeting those as well. And businesses must also think about contracts and service agreements, establishing those and ensuring that both parties are fully in agreement on everything to avoid disputes down the road. And this can be really challenging because ultimately businesses have competing interests. They both want to get the most control, so they are able to do things with their best interests in mind. They want monetary value and things like that. Costs and timeframes can also be a cause for disagreement as well. So, aside from agreements and finding the partner to begin with, you've also got this idea I mentioned earlier about losing skills because of outsourcing too much. So, or outsourcing unsuitable activities as well. So, not only have you got to really carefully consider who you're outsourcing to, but what are they going to be doing for you and how much are you outsourcing? You don't want every aspect of your business to suddenly be out of your control and in the control of others, because you need to maintain some level of control over your activities. And then, of course, the reputational risk as well, and things like fair wages and working conditions, like I mentioned earlier, can also be challenging, especially if the business is not aware of things that are happening. So, research is important for this as well. You need to make sure you're aware of the ins and outs of who you might be partnering with before you enter any agreement with them. So, a summary of the challenges to simplify that out a little bit. We've got finding an outsourcing partner, developing contracts with costs and times as different considerations, losing knowledge and skills potentially, outsourcing unsuitable activities, and reputational risks of any kind of unethical outsourcing. So, an example of a organization that outsourced unsuccessfully is actually Queensland Health. So the department outsourced the development of a payroll system to IBM, which is an American software development company. And this was an issue in multiple ways. You had budget issues, time frame issues, and the quality of the work wasn't up to scratch as well. So the original budget was $6 million, but then due to technological challenges and delays, the cost was reevaluated 2 times. The first time to 27 million and the next time to $1.2 billion. And then when they eventually got the outcome, the product that they were seeking, the system didn't actually function correctly. So not only did you have the delays and the cost blowing out, but you also had the issues that resulted from a poor quality system. So thousands of staff paycheck errors occurred as a result. And the Queensland government attempted to sue IBM, but was unsuccessful because of a waiver that released IBM of any liabilities. So the waiver would have been in that agreement that they had originally. So you can see here how that idea of coming up with an agreement, making sure that a lawyer is looking at it to make sure that your interests are served in the agreement, and that they don't have unreasonable kind of conditions, then that is really important to avoid these kind of legal ramifications as well. Challenges of operating in hostile competitive environments. So I've mentioned this idea of a hostile environment a few times already today. So what is it? It's a situation in which businesses actively compete against one another for customer attention and market share. And as I mentioned before, it's the maturity stage where you often see hostile environments. We've got a few examples here as well. Think about the supermarkets with Woolies and Coles. It's a really hostile environment there. And then Qantas and Virgin as well in the travel, air travel kind of space. So a major challenge in terms of operating in these environments is navigating those low profit margins. So a product's selling price is only a little bit higher than the expense that was incurred to manufacture or purchase the product and get it on the shelves or get it out there to customers. So this can create flow-on difficulties in terms of financial performance and long-term viabilities for the business, because they might struggle to meet expenses. They may not perform as well as shareholders may expect them to, so they may suffer in that kind of way with less shareholder interest and investment and trust. Maintaining competitive pricing and high inventory turnover is really important to offset the low profit margins. But that is also another challenge as well. So this kind of ties in with economies of scale. If you're only making a little bit of money for every product or service that you're selling, then you need to sell lots of it in order to generate lots of little bits of revenue that then stack up to get you into a good position financially. So you can tell with Woolworths and Coles, for example, they have lots of different things with pricing where they compete against one another, especially recently with things like the cost of living crisis, where they're trying to show that they are decreasing prices to help consumers. And so that is a thing where they're trying to appeal to consumers, but they're also trying to get a one-up on each other. So marketing strategies and hostile competitive environments. Again, we can look at Woolies and Coles for this as well. So marketing strategies are really important in hostile environments because they're going to help the brand maintain its visibility and recognition, and that's going to then help with keeping the market share as well. So marketing strategies are going to counterbalance those challenges that we just looked at with operating in those hostile environments. So it's aiming to attract those consumers either away from competitors toward the business or just maintaining existing customers as well. So with Woolies and Coles, in terms of the marketing strategies, Woolworths actually lost customers when Coles launched its Little Shop collectibles back in 2018. But to remain competitive, it realized that it needed to do something in a similar vein, so it launched its own collectibles as well. So you've had lots of different versions of these collectibles now. There was a Little Shop too. You can see here, we've got the Lion King collectibles. They've also had other different options with the Magic Garden and things like that at Woolworths. So not only are they competing with each other with these marketing strategies, but they're also trying to get a balance between offering something that is appealing to people in that marketing kind of sense. In this case, probably kids, getting them to beg their parents to spend enough money at the supermarket to get these collectibles. It's not only appealing to those people, but it's also making sure you keep other people satisfied. So a big thing for these collectibles was the environmental impact of them. So they faced some backlash because a lot of these things are made of plastic, which people didn't think was responsible of the supermarkets. They got rid of plastic bags, trying to show their sort of sustainability, but then they went and introduced things like this. So with every kind of strategy, you've got to have a balancing act between the interests of different people, particularly in those hostile environments where it's important to keep performing consistently. Back to total quality management and long-term achievements through customer satisfaction. So customer wants and needs, and then by association, customer satisfaction, form the basis of TQM. And so if you embed total quality management, then you're going to achieve customer satisfaction by guaranteeing the quality of products, and therefore promoting loyalty and referrals and then overall business success. Quality is something that is one of the key things that people look for when they're thinking about what product or service to choose. So if you have that reputation for good quality, then that's going to result in that sustained customer satisfaction. So an example here, we can also go back to Qantas. So it carries out programmed quality control inspections at key service stages to make sure that each process meets the different standards that they've set. And they have that minimal level of satisfactory quality for all the different stages. So similar to what we looked at earlier with Vitex Pharmaceuticals, they look at, in this case, production and the results in comparison to predetermined standards. And Qantas is known for not having had any fatal jet airliner accidents. So that, again, is something that they really can promote as part of their total quality management success. And that is going to keep customers coming back for more because they're satisfied with that quality and that safety aspect. Project management technology and operational efficiency. So we spoke earlier about project management, but then there's various technologies that can be used as part of this. And that can result in those operational efficiencies for a business, and that can boost productivity and improve as well the different resource uses as well. So using resources in the best way. So for example, you can use project management technologies to centralize and facilitate communication between employees, and make sure that projects are completed according to the schedule and the budget. So some examples of project management technologies that can promote operational efficiency. You've got collaboration tools, project tracking tools, information gathering, scheduling software, and workflow automation. So there's lots of tools out there that businesses use that are that collaborative kind of space where people can see the tasks that need to be done, the deadlines, the different requirements. You can add things and assign jobs to people, and it's all that idea of centralized. So one place where everyone can go. There are also some other technologies that can improve operational efficiency by reducing the human involvement entirely. So, automation, robotics, computer aided manufacturing, and computer integrated manufacturing. So, for example, with automation, you have systems where those sorts of collaboration tools, those platforms that I was mentioning, can automatically send an email, for example, to someone instead of having to get employees to write out emails individually. So if we look at an example is monday.com. So Brews News is an independent media organization. It's all about the brewing industry, the beer brewing industry, and it uses monday.com to make sure that automated emails go out to any breweries that it's engaging with. So if it posts a job from a brewery, then it can inform that business that the job has been posted through this automated system. And it also helps with employee collaboration as well, listing tasks, assigning tasks, tracking progress, adding different links and resources. So something that can be tricky in an organization is you've got lots of different emails that people can contact you through. You've got the emails of different staff members. You've got general emails for the business, an inquiry email for a certain aspect of the business, and then another inquiry email for another aspect, financial based emails, all those different things. So you sometimes can really benefit from having an integrated system where maybe if a particular email address receives an email, then that email can automatically be sent to a platform like monday.com so everyone in the business can see it. Now, if someone is taking a break, they're on leave, then you wouldn't have to go into their emails and invade their kind of space. All you would need to do is access this platform where the emails are automatically forwarded to. So you can see how these different project management technologies can create those efficiencies and help a business to manage different situations. So describe the characteristics of a hostile competitive environment and provide an example of a hostile industry. We looked at Qantas and Virgin. We looked at Woolies and Coles. There's a few other ones that come to mind. For example, the telecommunications industry, Telstra, Optus, Vodafone are the main ones there. So what is involved in that hostile competitive environment, and what are some examples that you can think of? Contemporary marketing strategies, branding, and loyalty. Now, these are all linked because businesses attracting it all of them relate to businesses attracting and forming relationships with customers. So brand loyalty is about strong branding and persistent use of marketing strategies to ensure customers are motivated to continually stick with the one company, maintain that loyalty instead of looking elsewhere. So you often have incentivizing elements designed to promote that loyalty when you've got a marketing strategy. So social media based promotional techniques commonly have things like competitions to benefit both the business and its customers, and that advances consumer loyalty. We looked earlier at GoPro and Starbucks for relationship marketing, and this ties in closely with that. So, an example we've got here is Apple's Shot on iPhone campaign, where they were encouraging people to go out and take photos on their iPhone and then share them as part of a competition. So, here you've got this competition aspect, people want to win, so that is an incentive in itself. They, of course, would have gotten some kind of benefit, some kind of reward from winning. So that's an incentive for them to do it in the first place. Then you've got a benefit as well for the business because you've got all of this user-generated content that you can then use on your own platforms. And you've got real life proof in this case that the quality of Apple's iPhone cameras is really high. That's what they're wanting to prove here. And they're getting people to go out and use their photography skills, use Apple's products to prove that. So it's a really authentic way of getting people involved and boosting the reputation of the business. Pareto's principle and the management of operational and marketing in a business. So, Pareto's principle is also called the 80-20 rule, and it says that 80% of the outcomes in a situation are a product of 20% of the causes. And this can relate to lots of different things. So, as long as it's got that 80-20 aspect, you can relate it to all sorts of different things. 80% of sales revenue could stem from 20% of customers. As well, the business's revenue, 80% of it could be generated by 20% of its products. Maybe most of the customer complaints are from 20% of customers, or 80% of sales are derived from 20% of advertising. So the 80% is the important part. It is what is the big factor that you're looking at. And then the other side of it is what is less important. So if 80% of a business's revenue is generated by 20% of its products, for example, the business is going to dedicate more resources to operational and marketing strategies associated with the 80%, the 20% of the products. And the other 80% of the products would be reviewed. So they could be changing those products to reflect what they've learnt about consumer needs. They could be discontinuing those products if they find that they're really not wanted in the market. So as a result of all of this, the Pareto principle is interconnected with managing operations and marketing because it's allowing the business to identify what products or services need to be allocated the most resources and what products need to be reviewed or discontinued. Okay, we're now on to the analytical tools and the evaluation criteria that you'll be using in year 12 throughout the year. And you will have already used some things in year 11 as well. So you should be familiar definitely with the SWOT analysis by now. And you also will probably have been introduced to some of the evaluation criteria. But we're going to go over each of these now. There are particular things that you need for the Unit 3 Topic 2 assignment. So that is what we're going to be looking at today. In terms of the syllabus, it says that you need to be able to select data and information relating to traditional, digital, and emerging marketing platforms to analyze the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's a SWOT analysis aspect. You need to be looking at marketing and operational functions for a mature business to analyze outsourcing power interest. So that's our power interest grid. And I mentioned earlier about how you've got this idea of control when it comes to outsourcing. And the power interest grid allows you to look at the power and the interest of different stakeholders. A business's current situation in a competitive, hostile environment to analyze using the SWOT analysis, and competitors in a hostile environment to analyze the USP, which is the USP analysis. And then interpret relationships, patterns, and trends in terms of marketing platforms, outsourcing, and situational SWOT and USP analysis tools. So this unit is really heavily focused on operations, marketing, and outsourcing, which you hopefully will have noticed so far. So keep in mind that your piece of assessment is not going to get you to do all of this. So you won't be doing a SWOT analysis, a power interest grid, and a USP analysis. More than likely, we'll be doing one or two of these, but you still need to understand all of them because you don't know yet what you will have on your assignment. So let's go through each of these in turn, starting with our SWOT analysis. So it's a method of assessing a business's internal strengths and weaknesses, and then external opportunities and threats. So strengths, what does the business do well and what does it have as an advantage over competitors? And weaknesses are just the opposite. What does the business lack or do poorly and what disadvantages does it have? Opportunities you could make use of in the business. So maybe there's expansion opportunities. Maybe there's an opportunity to invest in new technologies. Maybe there's increasing demand for certain things and you can leverage that to meet that demand. Threats are often about competitors, so what competitors the business has. It also can be just the business environment though as well. Thinking about those macro factors that we looked at earlier, they can all impact the business in positive or negative ways. So maybe there's legislative changes, maybe there's environmental issues that are affecting or threatening a business. So if we try and apply this to an example, so recently Optus had its national kind of outage, which was something that it's been heavily criticized for in terms of the way that it tried to manage that. So if we think about Optus in terms of a SWOT analysis, we could say its strengths perhaps are its existing large customer base. It's got around 10 million people that use Optus. And maybe you could say that it's got good capital as well behind it, the money that they can invest in different things since it is such a big company. But then weaknesses, maybe that's where the reputation at the moment is quite weak. Opportunities, I know that they have their board is in Singapore rather than Australia. So maybe an opportunity is to bring it to Australia or to have more Australian involvement in the way the company is run. Maybe there's an opportunity to make it up to existing consumers to try and get them to stay loyal to the brand, incentives or rewards or something for loyalty. Threats, definitely threats from competitors because people may be considering leaving the organization and going to Telstra or Vodafone, for example, and changes in the business environment. So things like they've already had issues with legislation that changed last year with the data breach that I mentioned earlier. So there could be other sort of changes in the environment that may affect them with this as well. Question 9 is describe Pareto's principle. So remember that this is that idea of the 80-20 rule. And think about what that means then for a business, what the 80%, sometimes the 80% is what's important, and sometimes the 20% is what's important. It depends on which way you look at that rule. Next up is the power interest grid. Now, this is used to analyze the power and the interest of stakeholders in a project. So measuring stakeholders' power and interest gives the individual or the team leading the project insight into the level of engagement and communication that each stakeholder needs. So it's a bit of like a research kind of thing where you're getting some insight into what you need to do to meet the wants and needs of those who are affected by what you're doing. So conducting a power interest grid involves plotting stakeholders on a graph. And the y-axis, which is vertical, represents the level of power, and the x-axis, the horizontal, represents the level of interest in the project. So the graph is divided into 4 sections, and each of these segments is representing a different degree of power and interest. So you've got monitor, which is low power and low interest. Keep informed, low power and high interest. So the idea is if they don't have much interest and they don't have much power, you still need to monitor them because that could change. But at the moment, they aren't really important. You don't need to be constantly communicating with them. You don't need to be consulting with them. You just need to keep track of them in case their position changes somehow. With Keep Informed, they've got high interest, but not much power. So you want to keep them in the loop with what's happening, but you don't really need to actually keep them satisfied so much because they don't have the power to change things or to influence your decisions in any way. Keep Satisfied is about having high power but then low interest. So they're not very interested in what's happening, but they do have power potentially. So you want to just make sure that they're happy with whatever's going on so you can continue, and that is all that's needed there. Whereas Manage Closely is about having high power and high interest. And so you need to not just monitor them, but really keep them involved, consult with them, make sure that everything that you're doing is aligning with what they want. So let's have a look at an example. So General Motors, the car company, wants to only manufacture electric cars by 2035 and become carbon neutral by 2040. And the company needs to determine the power and interest of stakeholders to effectively engage with them throughout the project. So this is pretty ambitious, and they want to make sure that they are meeting those consumer needs or those stakeholder needs, in fact. So the first step is, of course, to identify who are the stakeholders in any given situation. In this case, you've got the CEO, you've got various managers, employees, external organizations like the Environmental Defense Fund. You've got fuel stations who would be losing out on money because all of these cars would be developed that are electric and not that don't need their fuel. Electric vehicle charging stations, they would benefit from this development. Environmental activists and consumers, of course, as well. And step 2 is to plot the stakeholders on your power interest grid. You can see here how we've got those 4 segments I mentioned earlier. Now, the thing about plotting is you can think about it far too much sometimes. So try not to get really caught up in where you're placing things. You do need to be logical and you need to be able to justify your decisions, and you need to be able to be thinking about the different stakeholders in relation to one another. So would this stakeholder really have more power than this stakeholder? Would they be more interested or less interested? So you need to have that element of comparison. But in saying that, just thinking, should I move it half a centimeter to the left, half a centimeter to the right, up or down? Don't get too caught up in that kind of thing. You're thinking about the relationship between different stakeholders. So what should have higher or lower interest and power than the others? And you're also thinking about the category that it's falling in. So think carefully about whether you place something in. So, for example, here we've got consumers. They're in the keep informed section rather than manage closely. It would be a big decision to move that above into the manage closely section. So do think carefully about the actual section that it's falling under. And you can also decide that it deserves to be put right in the middle. You can put it right on the line as well if you feel that that's where it should sit. Evaluation criteria. So in your IA2, you'll need to evaluate business strategies to make a decision and propose a recommendation. So to do this, you need to use the different evaluation criteria, which there are 4 of. So competitiveness, stakeholder satisfaction, effectiveness, and efficiency. And according to the syllabus, you may have to evaluate marketing strategies for a business in a hostile environment, operating strategies, or marketing and operational activities to outsource as an alternative business strategy for the maturity stage. And for all of those things, you also need to make a decision and propose a recommendation using the criteria. So you evaluate it using the criteria, and off the back of that, you can then justify the decisions and recommendations. So let's go through each of these. Competitiveness. Now, the syllabus does provide definitions of each of these. So the syllabus says, to what degree has the business offered products or services that meet or exceed market standards in relation to other businesses? So you can compare different businesses and think about how competitive they are with one another. And then competitiveness can be measured according to lots of different things. So you can be looking at the 2 businesses in relation to their market share, the resources, the growth, the profit, intentions to expand, and the strategies that they use to drive competitiveness. With stakeholder satisfaction, it's to what extent has the business considered and managed stakeholder expectations in achieving goals or objectives. And remember that stakeholders are really broad. It can include customers, employees, investors, suppliers, and management. And you can look at this in lots of different ways as well. It could be customer-based growth, in which case it's likely that customers are satisfied and then maybe referring on other customers. Employee retention, keeping them around, shows that they're satisfied. And continued loyalty and funding from investors. Investors wouldn't be investing in the business if they weren't satisfied with the financial performance of the business. Effectiveness. To what degree has the business achieved goals or objectives, and to what extent has the business solved targeted problems? So it's relating to a business achieving its goals, and it can be applied to any kind of business strategy. Is it effective? So this is about doing the right thing, using the right strategy, the right approach to things. Efficiency, on the other hand, is doing that thing in the right way. So to what degree has the business optimized its use of resources and application of processes to achieve those goals or objectives? So things like the time and the effort and the money that something requires indicates the efficiency of that thing. So you can be doing the right thing, but you could be doing it in the wrong way. An effective strategy that's done in an inefficient way. It can also be the other way around. You can be doing the wrong thing, but be doing it in quite an efficient way. And our last question for you to consider is about Kmart. So Kmart repositioned itself to target women and mothers and focus on fashion and homewares a few years ago now. And there are now lots of social media accounts dedicated to Kmart hacks. So describe the business environment, citing relevant environmental factors in your explanation. Think about what are the internal operating and macro factors at play here, and potentially do some research to look into what this strategy was that the company used, and try and write a paragraph to describe it and show your knowledge of those aspects. This is an example QCEE assessment instrument for IA2. And so you can see that you will be given a little bit of context and then a task. In this case, investigate an authentic business that is in the maturity stage of the business life cycle and operating in a highly competitive and hostile environment. This is the basis of the unit. The maturity stage and highly competitive hostile environments. Focus on a specific problem faced by that business to examine a branding strategy, which is marketing related, and a total quality management strategy, which is operations, implemented by the business. So here is, in this particular assignment, you would need to know about those sub kind of ideas in order to then look at the business in terms of those factors. And then in this case, create a business report that communicates strategic development to the business owner or manager. So you've got those two aspects here, marketing and operations, that you're looking at. You've got the idea that it's a mature business and it's a hostile environment. Those are the consistent aspects here. And you could be having different requirements. This one is focusing on total quality management and branding strategies. You could be asked to look at outsourcing, for example. So let's have a look at an example in more detail. So Kmart, the issue that it's facing as an example, managing customer data, consent, and privacy preferences. So an operational strategy it's using to address this is working with some other organizations on the consent at Kmart centralized consent management solution. So this is a platform that collects and manages customer consent around the use of data for personalization, advertising, analytics, and all future applications. So that's something that is an operational change that they've made. And then a marketing strategy. They've actually got a new employee, a tech architect, as they call them. So a mesh between marketing and technology to bridge that gap between marketing and technology. So you've got the best customer experience possible. So think about different businesses that may have an issue that they've tried to address using operational strategies and marketing strategies. To finish, some tips and advice to help you as you navigate the rest of Year 12 business. So try and use business terminology. You've got your textbooks, your class notes, and your syllabus to all give you that indication of the language that you need to be using in this assignment and your future assignments and exams for this subject. And also just pay attention to your teacher. Your teacher is going to be taking you through all of these things that you need to know. And within that, they're going to be using the different terminology that you need to then understand and use yourself. When you write your assignment, aim to have a complete draft. I cannot emphasize this enough because the more that you have in your draft, the more feedback you're going to get from your teacher to help you refine what you've written. If you can do it as much as possible in advance, treating your draft as the final thing, then you know where you're at a little bit more. You've tried your best, and you can then see how you've performed when you get your feedback. Read the syllabus and use it as a guide. I've referred to it a couple of times today, and also this whole structure of this lecture, all of the content that we covered today is from the syllabus because the syllabus dictates what you can be assessed on. You're not going to be assessed on anything that is not in the syllabus. So reading that, using it as a study guide, particularly for exam-based things, so your external exam, that can be really handy. It can also just show you the different requirements for an assignment. If you're not sure about the amount of time you have for an assignment, the word count, the criteria as well, then you can go there for all of that information. And reading the sample assessment on the QCEE website, which I provided that screenshot of before, you can look at that in more detail to see what you may be expecting to have. And there's also a mid-level exemplar on the QCEE website for Unit 3, Topic 2. This can give you an indication of what you should be aiming for if you're going for that mid-level mark, what you should be trying to build on if you're aiming for something better, a mark that's higher than that. And it can just show you basic things like structure, like terminology, and things like that, that can then guide the way that you do your response as well. And lastly, referencing. Referencing in assignments is really important, and it's great to get into it now and to get a really good system going, because if you do decide to go to university after school, then referencing is even more of a big thing to make sure you get right. So keeping track of your references is a great thing to get in the habit of doing. And personally, I like to do my formal referencing after I finish the final copy of my assignment. So you can see down the bottom there, I've got an example of what it would look like in the draft and what it would look like in the final. So first of all, you've got this idea of keeping track of references. So I use a coding system. I create a table, and you can just have a really simple table. It could just have a code with a letter or a number and then just the URL. Or you can include all of this other detail as well, like the date you accessed it and the author. It depends on whether you want to have to go back to the resource when you do your formal referencing to get this information, or whether you want to just get it there originally. Once you've got that table, then you can create other tables with a title of the notes, and then some notes with where the reference is. So you got it from the reference with code A. That means that you don't need to be putting this huge URL everywhere to show where you got something. You've got this really concise, easy thing to keep track of where that information was from. Then you can see in the draft section there, you can put ref, standing for reference, with whatever number or letter it is in the body of the text. So that can be what you have in your draft, and that means that you're keeping track of where your reference is from. But if you need to make changes before you do your final submission, then you're not putting all this effort into doing perfect referencing only to then get rid of it later. So oftentimes I had to get rid of words from my draft. So if I had have done all of the referencing in my drafts, then that would have been a huge waste of time because I always had to get rid of things anyway. So that's just the way that I did it, and I would recommend that you follow a similar thing to save yourself some time, and make sure that you get everything right in terms of your referencing. Thank you everyone for coming along to our business lecture today. I hope that it was helpful for you, and I hope to see you in some future lectures as well. Good luck with the rest of your studies. Bye everyone.